Hello, I'm Katya Adler from the BBC World Service. This is The Global Story. Is Saudi Arabia's much trumpeted futuristic eco-city NEOM already losing its shine? Saudi Arabia says NEOM is a blueprint for tomorrow, part of its plan to wean the country off oil, the industry that made it rich. But even before the first home is built, questions are already being asked. Can NEOM meet its green promises? Are some people paying for this project with their lives? And even if this eco-city takes off, can it really future-proof Saudi Arabia's economy? Merlin Thomas is a reporter with BBC Verify. Now that's our drilling down, fact-checking superarm, which has been following the NEOM story for a number of years. And Merlin, you're behind a new BBC investigation into NEOM, which I really want to hear about. So thanks for joining us today.
No, it's great to be here.
And Samir Hashmi is our Middle East business correspondent based in Dubai, but very often and recently in Riyadh. A big hello to you.
Hi there. Good to be here.
For anyone who doesn't know about the plans for NEOM, it is sort of gobsmacking, for want of a better word, or sort of jaw-dropping. Glowing sand? What's that about? And a fake moon? How does that work even?
It's a good question because I don't know myself, and the Saudis haven't been super clear about that either. But these are just some of the plans as part of the NEOM project. There are loads of other aspects of it. There is a ski resort in the desert. There's a floating city. There's an industrial hub. There's movies going to be made in holographic experience. There's this like slick mirrored walled city that is 170 kilometers long. And this is like their crown jewel of their project. It's called The Line.
Designed for how many million people to live there?
Projected to have 9 million people. But it is worth saying that, you know, reportedly only 2.4 kilometers of the whole of the line, this 170 kilometer long city, is reportedly expected to be built by 2030. So, you know, temper your expectations.
What does the NEOM vision and the way it's being marketed tell us about Saudi Arabia now in 2024?
NEOM and The Line both are really the centerpiece of Saudi Arabia's grand vision for the future. So any big event that happens in Saudi Arabia now, because they hold a lot of international conferences, including the World Economic Forum, which happened last week, there was a lot of buzz and discussion about the NEOM and The Line, both the projects, and what it would look like and how it would transform Saudi Arabia's economy, the future, the way the country operates.
I understand there were some pretty incredible models on display.
Yes, that's right. I mean, at the World Economic Forum, there was this, they'd built this massive pavilion to showcase some of the mega projects that Saudi Arabia is working on. And one of them was NEOM and The Line project over there. So they had these few models over there that were on display. You had volunteers who were explaining you the details of how the city would look like, what it would include. The point they wanted to drive was to the investors who were present at the event is that it's not just something on paper. It's a project that has started on the ground. They're already working on it, and there is construction that is happening. And this is where this vision will come alive.
Samir, were you allowed to ask any questions? I mean, you said there were lots of people on hand to tell you stuff.
I mean, there are two ways of it. If you're talking to Saudi officials on record, like interviewing them, they're very clear what they will speak about and what they will not touch. Because sometimes they'll say that, you know, they don't handle that project or they're not looking into that aspect. But if you've chatted with a lot of officials who are speaking to you off the record, that's when they're more candid and frank. But they are more willing to answer these questions. Of course, they present a very positive picture, even now after these reports have come up about NEOM cutting back on the project and scaling it back. They are still sticking to the line that these are just some of the changes in the short term, but in the long term, they're sticking to it.
And basically, when you can't go there yourself, we have to resort to using satellite imagery. And that's basically what I have to do when I cover stories on Gaza and the war there. And that's what I've been doing. But it sounds kind of bizarre to do it for a country like Saudi Arabia, which in theory is open to people to go and visit. So at BBC Verify, we've used satellite imagery to look at what's going on the ground. So for example, we can't get there, but what we can see is we can see the entire kind of length of the spine of the line. And you can see that they've kind of dug out all of those foundations on satellite imagery.
Why is there such an attempt around NEOM to make this a really good news only story? How important is it to the government that this is a success?
It's very important. I think it's very, very critical for Saudi Arabia that NEOM is a success. So there are these 3 or 4 different areas or sectors that Saudi Arabia is focusing on, which will really help them transform their economy and reduce their dependence on oil exports. NEOM is one of the main pillars of that program. Second is tourism. They're building multiple tourist destinations across Saudi Arabia. They are building luxury tourist resorts over there. So they expect a lot of tourists, expats to come down and live there. And they're also investing a lot on, for example, e-gaming. Because e-gaming has really picked up. So that is something they're investing in a big way. They're also setting up a new car factory, electric vehicle factory. So this will be a made in Saudi Arabia car. And then, of course, the sports sector, where Saudis have invested billions of dollars over the last few years. What Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is doing, he's placing 3 or 4 big bets. And NEOM is actually the most pivotal out of these 4.
NEOM has been described as a home, a place, a dream for all, for everybody. And the area where it's being built was described as a perfect blank canvas by Mohammed bin Salman. It isn't an empty place.
There were villages, schools and hospitals. People lived whole lives there, and they know the land very well. And people I spoke to said, this is something that should have been incorporated into NEOM as a project. But the actual underbelly of the whole project is much, much darker.
Moving people to enable at least the start of the building of these projects is nothing new in Saudi Arabia, but there's an internationally recognized process, isn't there, about giving people warning, allowing them to appeal, providing them with substantial compensation. What's been happening here to make way for NEOM?
For years, these villagers protested that. They signed letters, they had talks, they had discussions, and there are all sorts of questions up in the air about how much compensation, if any, was given to these villagers, if that was worth what their actual land was that they owned. There are loads of kind of questions around that, and we haven't really got to the bottom of that completely.
Your investigation has focused over one local protester in particular, Abdul Rahim Al-Huwaiti. Tell us about him.
So in the process of all these government kind of visits to try and evict these people, one of the missions actually ended up with one villager shot dead by Saudi forces. Now, the Saudi government say he was an armed terrorist. UN and human rights groups dispute this. They say he was actually killed for refusing to be evicted, for refusing to move. But he was shot dead. And for kind of months and weeks beforehand, he had been posting on social media saying how he refused to be removed just for this project. He claimed that he would be killed and then made to look like a terrorist.
And your investigation sheds a bit more light on all of this, doesn't it?
This is a Saudi former ex-intelligence officer who now lives in the UK in exile. His name is Colonel Rabih Al-Anzi.
The order said whoever continues to resist should be killed. So it licensed the use of lethal force against whoever stayed in their home.
When he got this order for this mission to go and clear these villages, on which they said, yes, you can use lethal force to evict them, he dodged the mission. Basically, he pulled a sickie, is essentially what he said. And he said, under Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, he says that the orders were getting more brutal, and that he claims that the orders were also against peaceful activists. So the Saudi government and NEOM declined to comment on all of our findings in this investigation, but they have previously said that the villager that was killed for this project, Abdul Rahim Al-Huwaiti, they say he was an armed terrorist. Now, the UN and human rights groups refuse this. They say that actually he was killed for refusing to be evicted.
Malin, we're calling, NEOM is called this sort of eco city of the future. How environmentally friendly can NEOM be?
The thing is, there are two sides of this story, as with everything, which is that critics will say, yeah, you will have to air condition the whole of this 170 kilometre long line, this city. You will have to provide food for 9 million people, if that many people end up living there. You will have to provide power. But NEOM, Saudi Arabia, is saying this is going to be a car-free, carbon-free city, completely powered by renewable energy. We're going to do that by solar desalination plants. We're going to have vertical farming. We're going to have all of these kind of new eco-friendly solutions to providing and powering a city. Now, do those solutions work? Well, there are lots of people who say they won't because some of the technology doesn't exist. But they're saying, yes, actually, the technology exists on a very small scale. We just need to be here to kind of scale it up. So, you'll probably have heard the argument about lots of renewable energy, which is we just need to put the money into scaling up. And that is essentially Saudi Arabia's argument.
This is a futuristic city. Not much of it's been built yet. So let's look at the present day, the construction that's already underway, and it has been underway. I mean, surely that's carbon intensive if you're looking at a project that says it's going to be carbon free.
They say it's going to be kind of a circular carbon economy. That's essentially saying that the amount of energy it takes to build these things will also be kind of that's powered by solar power.
And that leads to accusations of greenwashing. Malin, tell us about greenwashing and whether you think it's a valid criticism to be levelled at NEOM.
Greenwashing is essentially making something look greener than it is. That is it in its essence. And Saudi Arabia in this project are really keen to kind of push the green credentials of this project, that there won't be any cars, that everything will be a walkable or cyclable distance, that it's all going to be self-powered, self-funded. How green actually is it? It's hard to tell. Scientists all over the world have really questioned the motives of the Saudi government. We put some of the environmental kind of criticism to Saudi Arabia and NEOM, and they didn't respond about these things. But there are big questions hanging over the project as to how green it is.
Samir, greenwashing is, as we've just heard, is when you make something look greener, more environmentally friendly than it actually is. But some of the other accusations at Saudi Arabia with NEOM is that actually it's a distraction project, a distraction from the fact that it's still pumping oil out of the ground. Does it have an intention to stop?
Saudi Arabia has publicly stated that they want to achieve zero carbon emission by 2060. But that doesn't mean that they will stop pumping oil. Essentially, what they're looking at is that they might not consume it internally and rely on renewables, but they will still keep pumping oil and also exporting it, especially to poorer countries and developing countries, because the understanding is that even if there is this transition happening, these countries, which is the poor countries and developing countries, may not have the resources to do that green transition. So they will still rely on fossil fuels to run their economies.
So it's this sort of two-pronged approach, isn't it? Continue with the oil, but invest in renewables. Good for our image and good for future protecting our economy. But when we look at the economy, I want to go back to our starting point, NEOM. Massive, ambitious, and hugely expensive. I mean, the stated costs, so these are the official projections of cost for the project, $500 billion US. I mean, Saudi Arabia is a wealthy country, but, we're hearing even that is a conservative estimate. So can Saudi Arabia afford it?
Yeah, it's a conservative estimate. In fact, if you talk to a lot of experts and financial analysts, they say the cost would be something to the tune of $1.5 to $2 trillion, which is 3 or 4 times than the stated amount. And the project cost of just the first phase has already gone up substantially to about $100 billion. And this, we are just talking about one tiny aspect of the NEOM project. So clearly, financial resources is going to be a challenge because right now the Saudi government is funding it. And if you look at $500 billion, which is the official amount, that is also double of what the annual budget of the Saudi government is. So they really need resources. They can't do it on their own. And if they have to raise, the kind of money they need to really achieve, this project in its entirety, then they'll need investors. And that is a big concern because if the cost goes up to $1.5 trillion or $2 trillion, it's not going to entice private investors, because eventually investors only come into those projects where they see a return on investment. And I think investors are not still sure about that how is this project going to make money and make money for them? How are they going to get that return?
And there have been questions, haven't they, Samir, about the design of the jewel in the crown, the line, right? I mean, the idea that a city is a line kind of goes against what we know about cities going back as far as we can remember, right? They sort of tend to circle around a hub.
Well, yeah, I think this whole idea of two skyscrapers running parallel to each other across the desert, 175 miles wide, is something unheard of. It's something that we've never actually, you see it in a sci-fi movie probably, but it's nothing like that has been attempted anywhere in the world. So there are a lot of concerns, and even a lot of architects and design companies you speak to, there are massive concerns at how is it going to work. Just one practical example which they've been grappling with, the height of these two skyscrapers is going to be about 1,600 feet, which is less than a kilometer. And the biggest concern is that it's going to impact migration of birds. And you have about 1 billion birds that migrate during the course of the year from east to west and west to east. So that could be a cause of concern, environmental concern, because they're going to bang right into the middle of these buildings when they try to migrate. So that's one of the concerns that a lot of experts have, that how is that going to work when you have these two skyscrapers running as tall as 1,600 feet. Even though the vision is that this city will be ready, the first phase would be ready by 2030. But actually, if you talk to a lot of architects, they say this could take decades and decades to really build.
Do you think that NEOM and the line will ever become reality? What's your gut instinct, sort of in your reality checking for the BBC? Is this going to become a reality?
With the Saudis, it's always hard to tell because, there is so much money that you can't ever underestimate them. So they might actually pull this off. Who knows? Never say never. But given what we know so far, given what we can see has already been achieved, given what, they said that they would have so much more of it done by 2030. They said that they'd have so much more up and running already, that they'd have their first residents there. And that hasn't really that hasn't panned out. So the likelihood of this being pulled off in the form that they say it will, I doubt it. But, I'd like to be proven wrong.
What do you think, Samir? Is it going to happen?
I think even if they're able to achieve half of what they have set out to do, I think it will be a success. Now, the thing is, can they execute it the way they've envisioned? Because at the end of the day, Katya, remember, it's not a grand dream project or a fantasy. It's more about an economic investment, which should generate returns. So I think eventually it boils down to, even if they're able to achieve half of it, are they able to make it commercially a viable project? Because so much is riding on this project as far as Saudi Arabia's economic future goes. Eventually, somewhere economics will trump any other dreams or aspirations, because Saudi Arabia is investing so much of money in this project. They can't keep doing that endlessly. It has to generate some kind of return. So it has to be a balance where they're able to project some parts of this project, which is a success, and at the same time also generate a return on investment, because eventually they'll run out of money if they don't get those kind of returns.
Samir, thank you very much indeed.
It was great speaking to you, Katya.
And thanks to you, Melon, as well.
Thanks so much for having me, Katya.
Thanks so much for watching. If you want to catch up with more episodes of The Global Story, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe. That way you will never miss an episode, and leave us a review. For now, you can leave your comments in the box below.